Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, it's not just John Lewis that Trump was sparring with via Twitter over the weekend. Also, outgoing CIA Director John Brennan, who criticized Trump in terms of his understanding of Russia and the threat Russia poses, to which Trump responded via Twitter that maybe Brennan was the leaker of that dossier.
The dossier.
He suggested maybe he is the inside man, despite assurances from Director of National Intelligence, outgoing Director of National Intelligence, John Clapper, that the leak did not come from inside the intelligence community. Here's what Brennan had to say.
I don't think he has a full appreciation of Russian capabilities, Russians' intentions, and actions that they are undertaking in many parts of the world. And that's what the obligation and responsibility of the intelligence community is. I very much hope that our relationship with Russia improves in the coming administration. But there is a fair amount of responsibility on Russia's part to change their behavior, change their actions. I think he has to be mindful that he does not yet, I think, have a full appreciation, understanding of what the implications are of going down that road, as well as making sure he understands what Russia is doing.
Yeah, it was gentle criticism. I mean, until you're the President of the United States, I don't know that anybody would have a full appreciation because they don't have access to all of the information that only a President of the United States has access to with respect to Russia or anybody else. So, I mean, now that said, it is the kind of couched criticism that comes from spooks like Brennan that really mean more than indicated at face value. So it's more of a criticism. Would he have said the same thing about Hillary Clinton? She doesn't have a full appreciation. Well, she had been Secretary of State. You could argue so. But I think there is something that's pointed about it beyond just he's not president yet, so he doesn't know everything that a president does know and that he will know. So it was cautionary. But one thing in response to Brennan and in response to the intelligence community and all of this, because you heard from Obama as well, you're going to have a good relationship with the intelligence community and
Right.
so forth. Well, of course, that's true. That's ideal. But listen to what Bob Woodward said on Chris Wallace's show. Bob Woodward, no card-carrying Republican, not part of the vast right-wing conspiracy. I think even the nasty women that are going to invade the mall over the weekend would concede that point. Listen to what Bob Woodward said about the intelligence community and how they've handled this matter.
When those former CIA people said these things about Trump, that he was a recruited, agent of the Russian...
Useful fool.
Yeah, and a useful fool. I mean, they started this, and in Trump's mind, he knows the old adage, once a man, always a CIA man. And no one came out and said those people shouldn't be saying things. So then Act Two is the briefing when this dossier is put out. I've lived in this world for 45 years where you get things and people make allegations. That is a garbage document. It never should have been presented as part of an intelligence briefing. As you suggested, other channels have the White House counsel give it to Trump's incoming White House counsel. So Trump's right to be upset about that. And I think if you look at the real chronology and the nature of the battle here, those intelligence chiefs who are the best we've had, who are terrific and have done great work, made a mistake here. And when people make mistakes, they should apologize.
Do you think, though, that Brennan was the leaker of the fake news?
I have no idea. I'm not going to accuse Brennan without substantiation, and I don't think it's appropriate for Trump to ask an open-ended question about Brennan being the leaker. That's what Trump does. I don't agree with that. But what Woodward said is important, too. You can't look at this in isolation. You have to look at this on a continuum, Act One and Act Two. And the military-industrial complex and portions of the intelligence community kind of at war with Trump from the campaign forward. That's important. Glenn Greenwald, the journalist, we talked about his appearance last week on Tucker Carlson's show, where he was suggesting that as well. Now, he's had an interesting relationship with Julian Assange. Julian Assange has made him kind of the journalist of record, at least prior to Hannity, when it comes to some of the WikiLeaks matters. But saying essentially the same thing. And we talked to Bret Baier last week about, going back to Bret Baier's forthcoming book, 3 Days in January, about Ike and his farewell speech, which included a warning to the nation about the burgeoning military-industrial complex. There is this fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy, and bureaucracy in the most sensitive areas like intelligence and national security, and they're not immune from politicization. And so they should be on watch for tendencies in that direction like anybody else, particularly because their positions and the work they do is so important. And, if there are elements that are seeking to undermine the President of the United States, like you'd see in a banana republic, then those elements need to be rooted out. I mean, that's not castigating the intelligence community writ large, but it's kind of raising the point that Bob Woodward raises in no uncertain terms right there. For more on this topic and many others, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Ed Henry, the chief national correspondent for Fox News Channel. Ed, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Amy, how are you?
Good. So what about that? We're just talking about a couple of the rhetorical battles over the weekend, Trump versus John Lewis, but Trump versus John Brennan and the intelligence community, what Bob Woodward had to say on Wallace's show.
Well, we can talk about both, but, you start there. I don't think anybody's hands are clean, as you lay it out very fairly, which is that, on one hand, the intelligence community should be obviously a lot more careful about sort of what they're sharing, not just with the president-elect, but what is leaking out. Donald Trump, the president-elect, has a fair point that here we are, all of this spilling out during the transition. It does not bode well for the weeks and months ahead in terms of him taking power and seeing all this intelligence, some of it completely unverified, just leaking out. On the other hand, it also doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the incoming president to be picking a battle with the intelligence community that he needs to help keep the country safe. And while there may be some bad actors who have been leaking, while there may be some bad actors who went with unverified information, there are hundreds and hundreds of intelligence officials many of whom either supported Donald Trump in the campaign or just are apolitical. They're just focused on getting the intelligence right. And have they made mistakes? Yes, they've made major mistakes in recent years. Everybody makes mistakes. But at the end of the day, their job is to keep the country safe. And that's something that both parties obviously are and should be concerned about. And so my broader point is nobody's hands are clean here. But at the end of the day, is this what the incoming president wants to spend his time on, which is, tweeting back and forth about, who's to blame in the intelligence community when he's about to have a whole series of issues hit his desk and hit his desk hard.
Well, what's the number one series of issues that you're talking about? What's going to hit his desk hard?
Well, I think national security is always the top issue. We all want to talk about the economy in the campaign, and I think your listeners want to hear about the economy, and that's certainly undoubtedly issue number one to them. And we could talk about that and talk about health care and the president-elect's comments to the Washington Post about how to try and fix Obamacare, not just repeal it, but come up with something that works better, which is an important priority as well. And I suspect for a lot of your listeners, education is important as well for their children. But if we don't have strong national security, if your listeners are not safe, and the president-elect talked about this in the campaign and has talked about it during the transition about terror attacks and the like. Think about also what's happening in Syria and the situation with Russia. Think about the Mideast, what happened at the UN with Israel. This has been a very, very busy presidential transition, and so it's always hard to kind of categorize all these issues, but he's going to have dozens of them literally hitting his desk on January 20th and 21st after being sworn in, and it's no longer just something you're tweeting about. It's actually something that you're responsible for, and I think that was part of John Brennan's point on Fox News Sunday, that, all of these issues are important, but national security stands above all.
After the first week of confirmation hearings, I wonder if it's your sense that the Democrats' target list of 8 or so for defeat, 8 or so nominations, has been winnowed down to maybe Betsy DeVos and Scott Pruitt forthcoming.
Those two, and I still think Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State may have some issues because that's less about a Democratic hit list and more about maybe I wouldn't call it a Republican hit list, but there are Republicans like Marco Rubio who have legitimate questions about Tillerson and his relationship with Russia. Other questions, for example, that popped up in his confirmation hearing about Iran sanctions. And some of the lobbying he and others at Exxon may have been doing on that very sensitive issue. And so I think the broader point is that the Democrats made a lot of noise with this hit list, and as you rightly point out, wanted to take out something like 8 nominations. There's no way that's going to happen. I mean, the Republicans have the votes on most of these nominations, largely, by the way, thanks to Harry Reid. They should thank Harry Reid for that, because as the Senate Democratic leader, you remember, he changed the rules so that filibusters really don't matter in these nominations, and the Republicans have the 51 votes on almost any of these nominations. That's why the Tillerson one I'd keep an eye on, because it's a rare one where you may see some Republicans jump ship, and then Donald Trump will have a problem.
That was very nice of Harry Reid.
Yeah,
Harry Reid really helped Donald Trump.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Well, speaking of Rex Tillerson, I was reading some transcripts of the confirmation hearings over the weekend, and Rex Tillerson never discussed Russia with Donald Trump. That
Right.
just blows
So
my mind.
either he's telling the truth and you're concerned as to why he hasn't spoken about Russia, the president-elect, or he's fibbing under oath. I don't want to use the word lie because we don't know if he's lying or not, but you're right. I don't know which is worse. Is it that Rex Tillerson is not telling the truth, or that Rex Tillerson is telling the truth and he and the president-elect haven't had a chance to talk about Russia yet? I mean, that would be surprising, because as I recall, it's been a few weeks. As I say, it's been pretty busy, and so if you think back, this wasn't that long ago when we were talking about Mitt Romney or Rudy Giuliani as potentially Secretary of State. Remember that? It seems almost like a year ago, but it was only weeks ago, a couple months ago. But Rex Tillerson, as you recall, came in for at least 2 job interviews, as I recall, and I'm kind of stunned that he'd say that Russia didn't come up.
I want to get your take on this. Help to kind of translate this, because I'm a little confused. Chuck Schumer said over the weekend that if Republicans repeal Obamacare without replacing it, without a replacement plan, Democrats are not going to help them out with any trouble they get into down the road. Is that the same Chuck Schumer just a couple weeks ago said, unless Trump abandons the Republican Party and agrees with us on everything, which would be opposition to repeal of Obamacare, he wasn't going to help anyway?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what the opposition does. I mean, the Republicans can't always be proud of what they were doing in the Obama years, let's remember, in terms of obstruction, and then saying, oh, what went wrong? Nothing's getting done in Washington. And, Mitch McConnell was saying, his top priority was blocking everything that that Barack Obama wanted to do. So, yes, Chuck Schumer, his hands are not going to be clean here either. But I think in terms of Obamacare, he does have a point there. Maybe he didn't make it well, but I think there's a point that even Donald Trump, if you read his comments in this Washington Post interview from over the weekend that broke out late last night, Donald Trump is acknowledging a point that Schumer's making, which is that Democrats own Obamacare. Make no mistake about it. They're the ones who rammed it through. But now that it's not working, by and large, there are parts of it are working, but the big picture is not working. The Republicans want to repeal and replace it. Schumer's right that they're going to own the repeal of it, whether they like it or not. And I think that's what Donald Trump is acknowledging. You don't have to take it from Chuck Schumer or from me. Donald Trump, in his comments to the Washington Post, is acknowledging we have to, he says he wants to cover everybody. He wants to cover all the people that are currently covered by Obamacare, but improve the situation. Now, can you actually do that? Because if you start ripping apart Obamacare, you're changing the whole nature of the program. And how do you cover those 20 million people who have been covered by this? And how do you do it while also saving money, which is the stated goal? Let's cover a lot of people, but let's do it for less. Look, that's something Democrats ultimately should embrace. Everybody should embrace that if it actually works. I think actually getting there is harder.
I got to ask you about 3 stories, and when taken together, do they mean there's a new profile of a candidate for federal and national office emerging? Politico reporting Peter Thiel is considering a bid for California governor.
Laura Ingraham.
Washington Examiner reporting Laura Ingraham looking at a Virginia Senate bid against Tim Kaine. And then Vanity Fair talking about Mark Zuckerberg eyeing a presidential run.
Where do we start?
Yes, right.
Laura Ingraham and Peter Thiel. These are folks who got behind Donald Trump early. So in the case of Laura Ingraham, was talked about as potentially a White House staffer. And if you're Laura Ingraham, and I haven't talked to her about it, and I don't know, whether this is true or not, but the story suggests that websites are being purchased with Ingraham for Senate. So there's at least the strong possibility of this. I think you're seeing the Trump effect. I think you're seeing people like Laura Ingraham maybe saying, "Why be a White House staffer? Why do that? Why not go for a bigger stage? Why not be a senator from Virginia?" She's got a national profile. She's got a radio program that reaches a lot of people. She's on Fox and other places where she can get her message out. And if Donald Trump holds a couple fundraisers for her, if Donald Trump endorses her, again, there's a big if she were to run, all of a sudden she's a serious contender. And I think the same with Peter Thiel out in California. He's somebody who stuck his neck out in the tech world to get behind Donald Trump. And look, we saw this with Obama. We see this with back in the Clinton and Bush days. If you can get that presidential power behind you for raising money and endorsements, Donald Trump proved that with one tweet, he could probably make even you a serious contender for the Senate in Illinois or something.
Even me.
There you go.
Wow. Boy,
So
that,
I mean, look,
that
I
is,
mean, I'm going to start it right now.
That
Why
is
not?
unbelievable power. That
You have
is,
too high of an
that
IQ.
That really brings it home in terms of the power that a tweet
In
has.
terms of Zuckerberg, I mean, look, Facebook has an incredible. I mean, again, look at the. I'm calling it the Trump effect. I mean, the Trump effect for someone like Laura Ingraham, a conservative who got behind Trump early, that could wind up being a big boost for her if she does jump into politics. But think about Zuckerberg. Think about the impact Facebook has and the millions of people who use it. Just like one Donald Trump tweet can have an impact on an issue or on a race. Mark Zuckerberg has vast power on the left right now. I'm not saying he's going to get in and use it, but I think Donald Trump has opened the eyes of a lot of people like Zuckerberg saying, well, do I want to just have this power at Facebook or do I want to maybe use it for something else?
Look forward to the Zuckerberg-Kanye West primary in 2020. Ed Henry, Chief National Correspondent for Fox News. Ed, thanks for joining us.
Good being on with you.
Appreciate it.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.